Problem 7A-2, not to be confused with exercise 7A-2, which was the previous problem. We're going to calculate gross pay and deductions, this time for 5 employees. So September company has 5 salaried employees. So no one's hourly, therefore no one's going to get overtime. So we can ignore the overtime columns down here, and we can ignore the regular columns because all these employees are salaried. Your task is to use the following information to prepare a payroll register to calculate net pay for each employee. So all a payroll register is this table down here. Notice it lists the employees. And now the thing to know about a payroll register is you do one for each pay period. So the employees listed here are only the ones that were paid during this particular pay period. So we have some information here. So in this data table, we have the employee names, allowances and marital status, cumulative earnings before this payroll, biweekly salary, and then the department. Over here, we have our assumptions. Things like it's reminding you that FICA OASDI is 6.2% on the first 127,200. Medicare is 1.45% on all earnings. There's a $35 biweekly deduction for medical insurance. State income tax is just 2% of gross pay, and FIT is calculated to use a federal income tax withholding table. That's included, which is in this box, but I also have it over here. So it's easier to see when we do this problem on video. All right. It says prepare a payroll register to calculate net pay for each employee. Prepare the register for the biweekly payroll period, yada, yada, yada. Round each calculation to the nearest cent. Of course, this is currency, so we have to round to the nearest cent, 2 decimals. If a box is not used in the table, leave it empty. Do not enter a 0. So we got some abbreviations. Allow, right here, allow means allowances. So right down here, when it says W4 allow, that means the W4 allowances. S stands for single. 0 would be 0 allowances. YTD, of course, means year to date. FIT means federal income tax. SIT means state income tax. EXP, which will be on this the next section of this assignment, stands for expense. Med, INS stands for medical insurance. And for the purpose of this problem, we will ignore the taxable FUTA and SUTA earnings. So later in this problem, they'll have some columns called taxable, FUTA, and SUTA. We will learn about FUTA and SUTA tax in the next chapter, so we're going to ignore it in this problem. And then there will also be some columns for expense account charged information. That will also be ignored in this problem, but we will get to do that later in the quarter. So now I'm going to move this up. So I'm going to open up my data table with the employee information. So notice the allowance and marital status has already been entered for us. Now the first column that we need to work on is prior earnings year to date. Now don't get that confused with over here current earnings year to date. So current earnings year to date, this will be prior earnings plus our gross pay. But first let's fill out the prior earnings year to date column. And the way we do that is we're going to go down here to cumulative earnings before this payroll. So I'm just going to copy and paste, and I recommend you do the same. Much easier than typing them and perhaps mistyping them. And we need to add this column, and we add the column, we get 282, 750. Salary, we're going to get that from over here in the biweekly salary column. I'm just going to copy and paste those. Copy and paste. Now on a homework problem, even on the test, if you want to set up a spreadsheet to do this, if you know Excel, you can do that too. I have no problems with that. It helps you learn Excel better. All right, now we're going to add up these salaries, and we get $6,800. All right, the regular column, hours, rate, and amount, this is only for hourly employees. All of these employees are paid a salary, so we can ignore that. And these most 99.9% of the time, salary people do not get overtime, so we're going to leave this column blank. So now we're going to fill in our gross pay. Our gross pay is just the same as our salary. And when we add these up, of course, we get $6,800. So current earnings year to date. All that is prior earnings year to date plus gross pay. So I'm going to take 39,000 plus gross pay gives us $40,250 for done. We take 35,000 plus 1,400 gives us 36,400. 53,800 plus 1,000, 54,800. Bothwell gets paid a lot. 125,950 plus 2,040 gives us 127,990. Now notice, remember, I'm going to click on the assumptions table. Remember that the wage base for OASDI is 127,200. So this person, Bothwell, is going to be over that amount in this pay period. So we're going to have to make sure we calculate their OASDI correctly, and it's going to be a little bit tricky. But we don't have to do that yet. And then for Ackman, we got 29,000 plus 1,110, and that gives us 30,110. We add up the current earnings year-to-date table, and we get 289,550. Then I'm going to check my answer. Well done. Now, taxable earnings. Notice it's really important that you understand what this means. A lot of students see OASDI and think, well, we have to put the OASDI deduction in here. No, the OASDI deduction goes over in this column. Notice this word deductions applies to the FIT, SIT, OASDI, Medicare, and medical insurance. It does not apply to this taxable earnings column. So what this taxable earnings column is trying to figure out is, let's look at done. How much of Dunn's gross pay of $1,250 is taxable for OASDI? Well, that depends. Is Dunn going to be above the 127,200 limit for OASDI? Well, no, he's not. He or she is not anywhere close. So all of Dunn's gross pay is taxable. Remember, this is taxable earnings, is taxable for OASDI. Now let's look at the second person, Herman. The second employee's current earnings year-to-date of $36,400 is also under $127,200. So the amount taxable is all of it. Roberts, same thing. He's not over. So Roberts, all of his is taxable. I'm going to skip Bothwell, and I'm going to go down to Ackman. So Ackman, gross pay plus current earnings, not anywhere close. So all of Ackman's gross earnings are taxable for OASDI. Now comes the tricky part of the whole problem. Notice for Bothwell, their current earnings year to date, which remember means prior plus the gross pay of this period, is over. So we had to make sure we don't tax too much for OASDI. So let's look to see if they were over prior to this. So prior to this, they were paid $125,950. So prior to this, oops, wrong box. Prior to this, they got paid $125,950. That was not over the $127,200. So we had to figure out how much of the salary, 2040, you can also say gross pay, 2040, is taxable for OASDI. And I'm going to use the method 1 and method 2 in the PowerPoint to show you how we're going to break this out step by step. Now I'm going to show you two ways to calculate how much of Brody Bothwell's salary is taxable for OASDI. First, we'll start with method 1, which is the graph, and this is the graph, or the graph method is what most students prefer. So here's our graph. Notice we got Brody Bothwell's gross pay, and then there'll be cumulative gross pay, and then the current paycheck. And this vertical axis, of course, is going to be cumulative gross pay. So the first thing we need to know is, what is the wage base for OASDI? It's $127,200. So then the next question is, what amount is taxable for each employee? Is it the gross pay under or above $127,200? Remember, the taxable part is the part under $127,200. So the next thing we need to know is, how much has Brody been paid prior to this paycheck? Well, that amount is $125,950. So this $125,950 has already been taxed for OASDI. And then we need to know, well, how much is Brody's current paycheck, and will the current paycheck put Brody above the $127,200? So Brody's getting paid $20.40 for this paycheck. That's their salary. And notice it puts them above the $127,200. So we cannot tax all of this paycheck for OASDI, because then we would be above the OASDI wage base. So what part of the 2040 paycheck is taxable? Is it the part under the $127,200 or the part above? The taxable part is the amount below. So then we just need to calculate how much of the current paycheck is below the $127,200. So to calculate that, you take the wage base, $127,200, and you subtract the year-to-date gross pay prior to this paycheck, which is $125,950. So you get the taxable amount of $1,250. Now we don't need to calculate the OASDI tax at this point, but if you wanted to, it would be $1,250 times 6.2%. So Brody will pay $77.50 in OASDI tax for this paycheck. Now, in case you like method 2 better, we will go over that. Again, the first box says to start we need year-to-date pay prior to this pay period. We need a gross pay, and we need the wage base, which we've got here in the yellow box. So let's look at the first question. Is the employee's year-to-date gross pay prior to this pay period, $125,950, greater than the wage base? No. So we go down below to the next question. Is year-to-date gross pay, $125,950, plus this pay period's gross pay less than the OASDI wage base? So year-to-date gross pay, $125,950, plus $2,040 is $127,990. So the question is that less than the wage base? No, it's not. So then we go over to this box that says employee's taxable amount for OASDI is the OASDI wage base, 127,200, minus the year-to-date gross pay prior to this paycheck, which is 125,950. So the answer is you take 127,200 wage base minus 125,950 year-to-date gross pay prior to this paycheck, means that $1,250 is taxable for OASDI for Brody for this paycheck. So we just figured out that the taxable earnings for OASDI for Bothwell is $1,250. So I'm going to enter that in here. And now what I can do is I'm going to add these up. And that gives us 6,010. Now you can put the cents in there of 0.00, but you don't have to because it's all because 6,010 is the same as 6,010.00. Next, we're going to work on the deductions. The federal income tax deduction for done. We will need the wage bracket table for the fit table over here. We also need some extra information. Well, actually, the extra information is right here. So Dunn's allowances is 0, so we're going to use this column. And gross pay is $1,250, so we're going to go down here to $1,250, and it looks like the fit tax deduction is $156.156 for done. Next, let's calculate the SIT. We need our assumptions for that. State income tax is 2% of gross pay, so I need my calculator. So I'm going to take Dunn's gross pay, $1,250, times 0.02 gives us $25 for SIT. The OASDI tax for Dunn is going to be, now remember for OASDI, technically you have to, the taxable earnings is over here. So you have to use this $1,250. 1250 times 0.062, because that's 6.2%, gives us $77.50. So I put the deduction for OASDI goes in this cell, put a 0 in there. Then we have Medicare. Medicare is going to be 1.45% of earnings. I should not have closed my calculator. So the earnings for Dunn is $1,250. I'm going to plug that in there, 1250. Well, let me show you, remind you how to convert the 1.45% to a decimal. So let's enter 1.45. That's, oops. I'm going to enter 1.45. That's the percent divided by 100 to convert it to a decimal, and then multiply that by the 1250, gives us $18.13. Remember, we have to round to 2 decimals, so this is 18.13. Medical insurance is $35. So to calculate net pay, I'm going to take gross pay, $1,250, minus our deductions. So minus 156, minus 25, minus 77.5, minus 1813, minus 35 gives us a net pay of 938.37. So I'm not going to go through all the steps because now they're just repetitive. So go ahead and fill out the rest of this for your to finish the problem. And if you want to check your solution before you submit, I will plug in the answer here. All right, I've plugged in the solution. Hopefully this is correct. I will check it in just a second. The only thing I can think of that you might have a little bit of problem is when we are doing the deduction for OASDI for Bothwell, you need to make sure you use this 1250 taxable earnings for OASDI instead of using the 2040. You can't tax Bothwell on the full 2040. You have to tax Bothwell on 1250. So 1250 times 6.2% should give us $77.50. Let me check my answer. There you go. So notice the my accounting lab put in the 0.00 for me on some of the ones that I left those off. That's okay. And that's it.